Good morning, everybody. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon on this, well, now it's a rainy Monday, the 27th of August. Hopefully, you guys have all had a good Monday so far. I hope that your weekend was good as well. We're going to mute my stream there, making sure that's working. Let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to go over the weekend in review, which is not a lot to talk about, and then we'll talk about price direction in the near future. I did just want to bring up, this is a site that you may or may not be familiar with, but I've been testing it for a little while. I actually totally forgot about it until I got an update from them saying, hey, by the way, this is Coinigy, and it lets you look at a huge amount of exchanges and their data, and it gives you the book as well. So like this is Bitfinex, but if I want to look at, is this Gemini, and look at a Bitcoin dollar. This is on Gemini or OKX. Not going to spend too much time looking at this, but that's an example. And then one of the really interesting things is about this site, this is kind of neat, is they have an arbitrage set up here. So if I look at GDAX, I know that the price is 67.39 or 67.34 versus 73.90. I wouldn't look too much into this because the spreads are not very accurate. This is something they still got to work on, and you can connect your APIs to this and so forth. So it's just an interesting thing. One thing is that I really do like about it is that the news service is fairly frequent. It'll come out with news regularly, so it'll pop up nicely. That's what I do like about it. But anyways, just thought I'd show you that. Take a quick look at what happened over the weekend. So on Friday, on the 24th, we were trading at 66.31. Actually, we closed at 66.88. We are currently trading at 6,700. All we've been doing is traveling up at a pretty steady pace. We are forming a triangle at the top here, and depending on how you want to look at it, I have a couple trend lines. Trend line from the previous triangle area that is holding as a support, previous trend line from here, which is acting as resistance, and then this trend line acting as resistance. We're also up against the 618 Fibonacci level. We're up against the pivot in price area, but we're approaching a breakout zone right here, right above us. So if price were to get above that 60 and get to 67.70 or 67.75, we would more than likely see a pretty swift rally. There have been attempts over the weekend on some pretty good volume to try and push this lower, but it has been bought up. There are quite a bit of a lot of the behavior is pretty bullish overall. Looking ahead. All right. Want to take a quick look at the review here of the financial astrology component. Is that this is yesterday's close, where we closed at 66,720. We are just a little bit above that right now. We leave the Mars retrograde on today, actually. So that happened this morning. So we leave the retrograde in Mars, which generally means we have a rising market. If I look at the notes that I took, except I think that's in the bigger binder. All right, here. Give me a moment while I'm looking. Mars think I made notes about that. Well, the general condition of a Mars retrograde cycle is to see prices rise as it comes out of it. Prices tend to trade equally up, down, or flat in the retrograde cycle of Mars, but they typically tend to rise. That's Bitcoin's behavior. And then we have, right where we're sitting, we have two beneficial aspects of Uranus trine the Sun and Uranus trine Saturn. These are associated with bullish sentiment. And then also the Sun in Virgo. And we have a new moon. It's a full moon. That's started yesterday. So we have all sorts of astrological phenomena forming right there. When I was doing some more research on this yesterday, I was checking on some of the, because one of the things that sucks is that you've got to, there's no, you have to like go through each planet, each sign, and you got to like put down all the angles and make sure that you're not missing something. So one of the things I did was Venus is a, so Venus is an interesting planet because it's associated with the Fibonacci sequence. All right, it is very heavily a planet that has angles, and how it returns is according to the Fibonacci sequence, how its orbit and how it enters in different signs. Venus is a very, very interesting planet for market movements because it follows very, very attached to the Fibonacci sequence. So, for instance, one of the, and this was one of Larry Pesavento's book on Venus, and he said that, oh man, I went to go eat lunch and I forgot to get all these notes out. What happens when you have so many? If you hear thunder, it's because we have thunderstorms outside. All right. Damn it. Oh no, I think I got it in here. Mars, Venus, retrograde. Oh yeah, so every 8 years, the Venus cycle contains the same zodiac sign every 8 years. During those 8 years, it orbits the Sun 13 times. Each station is approximately 72 degrees further along the zodiac from previous. Over an 8-year period, Venus marks 7 points. If linked, it would form a pentagram, which is associated with weather and abundance. Increments of 72 degrees create a resonance or a harmonic, which can be used to mark particular swing levels and price levels. And so when I was going over this, when I was reading all my old notes and trying to make sure I wasn't missing anything, I plotted Venus. This is going to blow your mind, but because it blew my mind, I could not believe it. I took the Venus angle, planetary angle of Venus, okay? The default is 15 degrees. And Larry Pesavento said, check it for 72 degrees in some markets. And that is Venus. You know what? How about I make this a little bit more, well, this is just nuts. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, but oh shoot, where are we at? What the color swing relation, and then on the, okay, so we'll go back in time here. So this is 72 Venus at 72 degrees with the angle repeated. So we see back in 2011, 2012, not a whole lot of correlation, but it does start to appear at these swing lows. And it does seem to appear at some peaks. All right. And then when we get into the current, we got a swing high there. Nothing much to see there, but I want to point out what we've got going on here. So if we go back to July of 2017, the 72-degree angle of Venus is the 72 degree every 72 degrees we get the swing lows, and now we have these swing highs. I don't know about you, but this is pretty freaking crazy. I've never seen, I've not recently plotted anything on the astronomical charts relating to Bitcoin that has looked so precise. And 72 degrees is just it's a fifth of a circle, so that's what that is. The other one was 36 degrees, so that's in halves, or not halves, but 36 degrees. It's in tenths. And the 36 degrees, we actually get a pretty nice swing setup with these angles. It's a little weird, not gonna lie. It's a little weird, especially for the current price action. It's a little bizarre. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody else tell me if that is weird or not, because I think it's pretty weird. And then the other one was for 18 degrees, but 18 degrees is there's way too many for it to be of any significance. But the 72 degree increments, those have some pretty interesting swing relations. I'm pretty fascinated by that. So that's that Astro. That is the Astro thing that I wanted to go over. Looking into the near future and looking at the current price action, I mean, for the day, not really seeing a whole lot of activity one way or the other. I mean, we have been in a pretty tight range. We've just been continuing to move higher bit by bit. This whole business here all of this is just awaiting a breakout above or below. This is a pretty typical pattern that's a continuation pattern. But otherwise, I mean, it's just a waiting game. So it's nice to see some of the alts are catching a bid here. Like we see Cardano is breaking out of a range here. It's breaking out of a I mean, what we're looking at here in Cardano is a bullish pennant, and that's exactly what we've got going on in Bitcoin. Is we've got a bullish pennant. Walton Chain is seeing some selling pressure. Nano is seeing some pressure here too. Actually had a short idea based on this level over the weekend, but then it got extended and then added the short again at the higher mode. And yeah, we're getting like a head and shoulders pattern here, but Nano has certainly been a driver, and it's showing some weakness here. Basic attention token is catching a little bit of a bid, which is nice. It's still really flat and consolidating. XLM, Stellar Lumens, looks like we may get a breakout above there too if we can reach up that high. We had that Steam. I took a couple positions, actually, I don't know how many Steam I bought, but I took a couple add-ins on Steam just because, you know, looking at the daily chart, and this is what I'm doing right now is I'm looking at charts that look like this, where they are just forming these flat bottom zones. So for Steam, you know, this is just a flat bottom here, and we see there's a lot of bullish divergence in here. So for me, Steam is a buy here. 0 point. What's the BTC pair? 1 2 3 1 3 7 8. Steam was one. EOS. I don't think I don't remember if I want. Yeah, EOS. That's right. I was just checking my memory. Long at 5.19. OMG, no. ETC, no. Don't need that one. Neo, no. I think Bitcoin Gold was one. Yeah, Bitcoin Gold was one. At Dash was, I was checking this one out. I would want to get into it above there at 155.20. Had a nice breakout on the hourly there. PPT. Yeah, it's coming off of a nice. This is a pretty extended bull flag. I mean, some people may not say that. Some people may say that the flag is invalidated because it's longer. The length it's spent is longer than the price action. So the time and price are the time is longer than the price. So some people say that this is not valid anymore. But PPT, when this is popular, when it does break, it tends to break pretty swiftly. It's kind of like ontology, but I mean, if I'm looking for a break higher, I've got to wait for there, which is fine. 0.000723. Oops. Then we had Lisk was one. I thought maybe it was overdone a little bit. On the daily, yeah, Lisk is actually forming somewhat of a bull flag on the daily. Already did Steam, Scicoin, no. OMG, no. Lend, IOTA actually caught a bit of a bid here. Now, IOTA. This is one. We were looking at the relative rotation graph of IOTA back on Thursday or Friday. And yeah, here it is. It was on Friday. Thursday or Friday. What day was 23rd? Okay. Looking at IOTA, it has had a really nice drive. At the end of the day, we'll probably see IOTA pointed more towards over here to getting into the leading category. But otherwise, when I'm looking at this here, I'm not seeing a whole lot of maybe XCM and ET. Oh, what do we got in here? Yeah, Dash was 180. Cardano. Yes, Cardano was one that needed to be picked up. Bitcoin Gold, definitely. Ethereum, yeah. That's a lot of volume on IOTA. That's pretty big. I want to do the scanner, or the screener rather, and I want to find the monthly underperformers. Looking for the Bitcoin pairs though. Okay, so you see DOC, Golos, looking for something that actually has some volume in it though. QKC maybe, but we may be overdone on the weekly already. TNB. I think that's only on Bitrix. I don't think that's on Binance. BC, okay. BCPT. Actually, used to trade this one quite a bit. Yes, this was one. Yep. Let's check it out on the hourly. Yeah, it's just coming off of a flag, so I'd probably get above this long here at 0.09. Well, let's do the Bitcoin pair. Binance. Back above the base here would be, okay. BC, what are we? BCPT, BTC. That'd be it. Oh, we said 1355. Okay. All right. Projecting out here. Let's look at Bitcoin again. Ooh, actually, it's having a little pressure right now. All right. On the weekly, I believe we closed the weekly. Yes, we did. We closed the weekly. This is the kind of candlestick setup we were looking for. This is. Can you give a brief intro about William Delbert Gann and Gann analysis? Yes, I can definitely do that. I'm going to just go over this real fast, but last week, price action wise on candlesticks, we were looking for a bullish pivot setup with the weekly candlesticks, which is exactly what we've got. So on a bullish pivot pattern, we want to see, it's a 3 candlestick pattern where the middle candlestick has a lower high and a lower low compared to the outside. So the middle candlestick here has a lower high and lower low to this one, and it has a lower high and lower low compared to last week's. What that means is that we get we generally will see a pivot in price form, where this week we should have a very bullish rise after this move. Okay? That is what we're looking for. Okay, so a brief intro about William Delbert Gann. I think maybe, interestingly, one of the best ways to explain it is the very if you ever want to know what, like, if you want to get into technical analysis, if you want to know like what's something that you could read or reference, there's a book by Charles D. Kirkpatrick and Julia R. Dahlquist. It's called Technical Analysis, the Complete Resource for Financial Market Technicians. It's the 3rd edition. It was updated in 2013. This book is used in the chartered market technicians material. This book is used quite a bit, and it is literally it's definitely kind of the technical analysts' Bible. They are pretty good about updating. They take a very logical and academic, scientific approach to technical analysis, and this is weird in some ways. You know, the Ichimoku system is actually very old, but as far as the written material and the educational material for market technicians, it is still considered very new because it did not come into the U.S. until the 90s, and I don't think it actually was adopted until much later in the early 2000s is when you started to see it a lot more. But if I can, okay, yeah, page 530. This fascinates me that I'm going to read this to you. It's not very long. Okay. Uh, William Delbert Gann, born in Texas in 1878, roughly at the same time as Eliot, left his formal schooling to begin his career as an itinerant salesman. He made several fortunes in the commodities markets, married a number of younger women, bit of a playboy, several fortunes. Um, he was a prolific writer, and one thing that we do know about him is that he was a superb trader. Now this is the part of stuff that is weird because now Eliot is one of the fathers of technical analysis. So is Dow. So is Gartley. You know, there's a lot of these guys who created the initial theory, but we don't know how good of traders they were. We don't know how good their theories panned out for people. All right. One of the only ones that we know how good of a trader they were, because we actually had people record them and witness them when it was written in newspapers and articles back in the day, was Gann. Gann was a very famous trader in his day, and people were fascinated by his by his trading. So the last thing that the book mentions about Gann is that they said that there's no question that Gann was an inventive person. Whether his discoveries are hocus pocus to sell his courses and books, we do not know, because his methods are too vague to properly test. But even today, a few analysts follow his numerological methods and claim success. I include myself among the very few. And yeah, so this is weird. So Gann's work in the technical analysis field is very, very it's kind of almost looked down upon, or it's just used that it's viewed as kind of hocus pocus, like it said, which is weird because technical analysis itself used to be perceived as a bunch of hocus pocus and witchcraft. So it's weird to see that, but Gann's work definitely does work if it's properly applied. That is the problem. I think the reason that Gann's work is not utilized a lot by the professional community or by funds is that you can't create, well, maybe you can, but it's difficult to create specific algorithms for it. And the reason why a lot of new traders don't use it is because it actually involves some work. You know, you can't just search for an indicator, throw it on a screen, and then it works for you. That's not how it works. So Gann's big thing was on time. His big thing was that time rules the markets. That time is the reason that trends change. It wasn't the news. It wasn't tweets. He never said that. But it's not the news, and it's not human activity. That it's time cycles that dictate the moves in markets. And there's a whole bunch of various time cycles that he used. And they're based on his different squares. So there's square of 144, the square of 52, square of 12, which is the square of 144. But Gann's big thing was on time dictating the changes and trends and when they'll happen. And then how you trade that action is using his geometry, which is the application of angles on a chart. And the angles, you know, I often use them and like support and resistance, but they're not really support and resistance levels. They are actually they represent momentum. They don't represent a static area of support and resistance. So the one of the things that I've noticed with the angles in Gann's work is that when you witness the when you test an angle, it's not like support and resistance in other like long-term trends or dynamic support and resistance levels that are based on past price action. Gann's work with his angles, it seems to be that the more they're tested, the weaker they get. All right, because the angles represent like a they're like a, I don't know, they're like a weak squeaky wooden bridge. The more they're tested, the weaker they get. Anyways, Gann's big thing again was on time cycles, and so if we were to look back at any instrument, we could go to the daily here. So here's a good example. This is the square. This is a square of 144, and the price action in this square. So the squares here, if you can see them, they actually go off of the screen here. I would have to unlock the scale, or rather lock the scale and drag this up. So the square of 144 goes all the way up to 56,000, give or take. So that's the very top of the square. So, and then it lasts for how many days? So it's 56,000 units of price and 558 days. 558 days, 56,000 units of price. That is the square of 144. That's how this trades. Now, looking at this is the daily chart. An example of those time cycles and how they work is right here, where we have the beginning and end of a new square. So we started a new square, and it's very common near the beginning and the end of a cycle, especially a new one, that when prices get up to it, you will see a change in the trend, or either a major or a minor change in trend. But otherwise, when prices get to this area, it doesn't happen right away. It can happen a little bit before or after, but you will often see prices act differently. The trend will often deviate from what it was before. So in Gann's time cycles, they act as a resistance in time to the trend in force. Okay? And then the angles themselves represent almost like trading ranges or trading channels. And so you can see, how price is constructed and how it finds its tops and bottoms. The square represents where those areas are very, very efficiently, about as accurately as you're going to find anything. So, one of the problems with candlesticks is that, these wicks, it's always hard to determine how far something may go, or you may wonder, well, why did it get stopped at these levels? But you'll often find, depending on the style of the square you're using, that it's because of the square. Another way to look at it is here. This is the square of 192. This is the one I think. I still have some markets are more sensitive to not every market uses this, is sensitive to the same type of geometry. So some markets like the square of 52, some markets like the square of 144, some markets like this one. Actually, this is my own creation. This is combining Gann's time cycle, the law of vibration, and then I've implemented some of the various price levels that Gann would use. So Gann would use natural squares, or he would use squares off of his square of 9. And that's what I've done here, is plotted numbers off of the square of 9. And that's where these major harmonic levels are. So these are static levels. They never change. They never move. And for Gann's work, if I place those time levels in between, if I have them from one major octave to the next, this forms a fairly nice, smooth way to trade price action with Bitcoin. So, gotta get rid of that angle. Don't need that there anymore. So this law of vibration started shortly after the all-time high was met. And you can kind of see a shared relationship between this and the square we just looked at, where we had this. These red lines represent the vertical lines represent pivots in time. These are they all represent pivots in time, but the red, the blue, and the other red, these represent the strongest pivots in time. So when price approaches these levels, they act as a resistance in time to the trend in force. And so we see that like shortly after price traveled beyond this, we saw it have a counter trend move before it resumed the trend. And we saw this minor uptrend where that turned into another bear move in the middle of this 192-day cycle. And then we had a bull move up until we got close to this pivot here, and we saw it fall down. And then as we moved down, here we are now. This new yearly low was found right at the end and the beginning of a new square it will in this new cycle, this 192-day cycle. And so that's where we are currently. It's Gann's work is pretty fascinating stuff, and it seems weird, but I mean, I tell you, it's very effective stuff. It really provides kind of a roadmap of where something is going and may be going, and it gives you a nice little. Well, I'll use this for example. So let's look. This is the pound dollar pair. Okay. Now, if you're a Forex Lens customer, where we do this in the morning, we've looked at. I mean, this I've had this. This isn't something I just made today. I have had this chart up like this for the pound dollar for months. And we've been looking at this chart for a long time. So this has been up here prior to today or last week or the week before or a month before. So before this price action even ended up here, we can see that the resistance area for one of these swings, you know what? There we go. For one of these swings was right at this arc. And then today it got up as far as here and it's holding here. So the arcs represent they're kind of like a pause in time almost. Prices don't like to stay in them. The arcs act as like rejection areas. Prices don't want to stay in them for very long or around them. They either want to get rejected pretty heavily or they want to be bought off of them pretty swiftly. So prices do not like to stay in these arcs. But the arcs themselves act as pretty natural areas of support and resistance. We'll see that frequently throughout any type of chart. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon, and they're very, very cool. Anybody have any questions about this? And that's fine. I mean, don't be afraid to ask, because I mean, not many people use this stuff or have any idea what it is. It's very, very normal. I got this. Man, I sometimes get these things from Upwork. Like, this person got a hold of me. I would like to share 30% profit with you if you can trade my account from 10K to 30K. Yeah, I'll just triple somebody's money just like that. I'm in urgent need of money since I'm a student and I made a mistake using all my tuition fee to trade. Oh my God. My bill is coming so soon and I am bankrupt if I can't withdraw my money from the investment website called Boom Exchange. I would like you to help me raise $30,000 since the account have a minimum withdrawal limit and I got 15-day trade per day. Help me do August 31st. Good Lord. Any of you wanting to be traders? I think you're idiots. I tell people frequently that trading is a very, very, very bad idea. But I also recognize that people are self-destructive, and a lot of people generally have a desire to have the independence that is associated with trading. So the education out there is mostly crap. The people who provide it are crap, and I think and I like to teach, and I want to make sure that people can get information that is useful, important, relevant, and not a waste of time. Like, for example, okay, the MACD. Oh no, you know what? Let's do the RSI. That's probably the most popular one. So the RSI. Everybody probably knows what the RSI is. Everybody probably uses it. It's one of the first oscillators that people use and they become accustomed to. And the problem with it is because it's easy to understand. The RSI is very simple to understand. There's an overbought and an oversold condition, and if you look at past price history, like, oh, well, when it goes into overbought, it sells off. That's easy to short. Or when it gets close to oversold or isn't oversold, that means it's easy to buy. No, that's not how it works. The RSI is a bounded oscillator. It is useful only really in if you know what you're doing. You can use it in trending markets, but it's mostly useful in ranging markets. So in this case, the sell the overbought, buy the oversold, because we've been in a range, that rule actually plays out fairly well. The problem is you don't know when you're in a range until it's over. You know, it's that's the hold on one second here. The problem with a range is that you often don't realize you're in one until you've seen 2 or 3 tops or bottoms. And the thing is that after 2 or 3 tops or bottoms, things usually break out of that range. So you don't even, you're not able to trade in it because it's already expanded out of it. That's the problem. The other issue is that markets trend 30% of the time. They spend the remainder of their time in a range. But yet again, we don't know that the range has been established until after it's already been established, and by that time it starts to trend again. So it's a very frustrating thing that we have to get used to. Oops. There we go. Okay. But the RSI, this is one of the first oscillators ever, but it's old. It has gotten better. All right. Now, I bet you won't ever find this in anybody else's trading room because they just, I don't know, they won't ever tell you. The RSI is great, but it's old, and the issues with the RSI are many, and so there's something better, something different. Not even TradingView has it as a standard indicator. There's only one piece of software I know of that has it as a standard indicator, and that is Optima. And the indicator I'm talking about is the composite index. That was created by Constance Brown. And in TradingView, somebody created it. But you go to indicators and strategies and you type in Constance. And we're looking for excuse me. We're looking for this one right here. Constance Brown Composite Index and RSI Averages. Okay. You will see that the RSI is very similar, that the composite index is very similar to the RSI, but it is also very different. The RSI is very deficient in its ability to account for volatility and for catching major divergences ahead of time. I'm looking at one right now, actually. So, bearish divergence. Right here, this looks like it's normal, okay? We have higher high in price, higher high in the RSI. There's an issue with this because just the momentum and the other calculations involved in here tell us that there's a bearish divergence. So we have this high followed by a lower high and a higher high. This bearish divergence shows up and it is very apparent. This is just an example of one example of how the composite index is much more efficient when compared to the RSI. Think of the RSI as Windows 3.0, and think of the composite index as the Windows 10. Okay. Calvin asked, "What's a simple strategy using Gann charts?" A simple one. A simple strategy with Gann. That is a good question. I don't know if there's a simple one, but well, if you guys remember how we square a range, squaring a range, a very simple way to. So, okay, let's say we're looking at the square of 144 right now, and I'm looking at, here's the composite index, and this is the stochastic RSI. Okay, so I'm looking at the chart, and one of the things that I'm going to want to be aware of is the relative position of price near an angle, okay, and a price level, so to speak. So let's see if we're looking over here, maybe trying to find a good example of one. Well, actually, right here is not bad. So we had price trading against this angle, and then it dropped down, okay? And then what happened is price traded back up to it, and it's testing it, okay? I just made it look better on a 1 hour chart. Where are you at, dude? There we are. So on the 1 hour chart, we saw price break down and hold, but it's not really trading up against it. It's finding resistance. What I'm going to be looking for is a failed break higher. Okay. Not only am I looking for that in the price action, but I'm looking for it in the oscillator. So when I start to see this activity here, where I see that we're in elevated conditions in the composite index and the stochastic RSI, it's actually planing. Then we see it come down, trade back up, get rejected. This is where you use all of your tools of technical analysis. You would look at this and say, well, that is a bearish looking candlestick. And what am I looking at here? I'm looking at, in these two swing highs here, this one's a higher high than this one over here. But on both of these oscillators, the stochastic RSI is a faster oscillator than the composite index. But on both of these oscillators, there's bearish divergence. Bearish divergence, again, is where price is displaying a higher high, but the oscillator's producing lower highs. And so this would be a good signal for me to wait for the price action to show me bearish move lower, and then I would be taking a short position. All right. The angles really provide the trigger for the trader to look at everything else, and then we see it trading and blah 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 blah. And one of the things with Gann's work is really you're kind of looking at, if you're trading inside the squares, you are looking at to trade off the angles, and then if there's certain price levels that coincide with that, then that is a kind of a benefit. So certainly here is another good example. We come across the angle, we're having selling pressure, we're not getting any bounce off of this. This is a inner 6/8 harmonic. This is a naturally strong, very strong pivot. So this is just like the red vertical lines, the red horizontal lines. and the red vertical lines are shared in how they respond to price, except in this state, we did not get a bullish bounce. We got a very bearish continuation lower. But, looking at the conditions of both of these oscillators, they're both sitting pretty neutral. And I should say that the stochastic RSI is a bounded oscillator and the composite index is unbounded. So we look at this condition here. The price action itself is showing us weakness, that it's not responding higher. And then we also observe that, while we're in these neutral conditions, we are trending lower in our oscillators. So that is a good kind of a sell signal. It's that's about as easy excuse me, about as easy. Oh, that price projection worked out pretty nicely, didn't it? Forgot I did that. Let's moving on over here. So if I'm looking at the current activity right now, here's the issue with the squares is that you will get into these wide expansive range. So if you see, here's the angles, there's nothing really in front of it until we get up to actually I probably need to go to the 4 hour to figure out what time that is. Not until October, according to this square here, do we actually get closer to an angle in time. The other angles are above us or below us by a significant amount. So prices, when they travel into these kind of zones where you see, and this is kind of how you should view these areas, is you should think of them as trading in a shape. Turn this orange and make it thicker. So what I'm talking about is all of this. That highlighted yellow areas where we should see price trading against and around. But for right now, it's not. A good example maybe might be looking at, let's look at Litecoin. Somewhere in the past here. All right, yeah, here's a pretty good example. This is a shorter trading area, but if we look at the angles, when price entered into above this angle, where's the trading ranges? Where are we going to see? The squares kind of break up the trading into separate trading ranges, or they're restricted to a certain shape. All right, and if you have to color them in, that's perfectly fine, but it really helps with the trading to see, well, okay. I mean, the problem with trading just flat horizontal levels of support and resistance is that is not how markets are. They don't operate flat. In fact, if we look at Bitcoin's chart, or how about the Aussie dollar? If we look at the Aussie dollar's chart, we see these wavy lines. These wavy lines represent the longitudinal position of Saturn, and you can transpose that onto a chart. I know I showed some of you have seen this before, some of you haven't, but you can see that the candlesticks themselves almost follow the kind of the contour of these levels. All right, they don't follow them just like straight lines. The pound is pretty good at that, or is it? Or am I thinking of gold? Maybe, I don't know which one I'm thinking of. Anyways, the behavior is not a very straight line, and I think one of the strengths of utilizing one of Gann's squares is that it breaks up the trading into a pattern and a shape, and that makes it easier to kind of focus on a single trading area instead of worrying about, you know, what's ahead. So here, actually, this is a pretty good example right now. So Litecoin has been trading in this shape. I don't think I have to highlight it, but it looks like a rectangle. And right now it's closed above. It's been trading up against this angle. Now it's closed above it. And look where price on this 4-hour candlestick, look how far it traded down, and look where it got bought up off of. Okay. I don't know anything in the past that says that that was a horizontal level of support, but I do know that this angle has been acting as a natural stopping point for Litecoin. Litecoin has struggled to break above this, but now looking at this on the 4-hour chart, it looks like we could be forming a nice bullish breakout. And following the rule of angles states that when you break an angle, you move to test the next one. So that next one is right up here at the $68 zone. Now, generally what you want to see is, when I say it breaks an angle, Gann never said this, but I've just kind of learned that, like, I want to see a 4-hour, either 4-hour or longer. So 4-hour, 8-hour, 12-hour, or a day. I want to see one candlestick break above here. I want to see one candlestick that is traded solely above that line where it didn't even cross this line again. It's okay if it, I might break that rule a bit and say that is just a test, but I don't want to see the body of a candlestick below this line. I want to see the whole body. So the open and the close, I want to see traded entirely above this angle, and then I'd be entertaining a long position. All right. Does that kind of make sense? This is about the simplest as I can get. Because, folks, I tell you what, when I first started trading, I learned the Ichimoku system because that made sense to me. That worked out. That kind of work that I learned so much by following the Ichimoku system, because it teaches a whole bunch of things. And one of those things is, in the Ichimoku system, it's very complementary to Gann, is that with the Ichimoku system, it also tells you where future areas of support and resistance may be found. And it's not done in just a horizontal level either. So, I mean, this is a perfect example of how this is so complementary. Gann and Goichi Hosada created the Ichimoku system before World War II. And I think those two probably would have been good bowling friends, because they both had the same, they're both essentially telling us the same story, but they have a different, what am I saying? It's a different way to tell the same story. That's essentially what we got going on here. So, there's a breakout range. Like I was saying, that this broke this angle, and I want to see another candlestick that is above this and trading, entirely within this area. If that were to happen, then more than likely we get a candlestick that is not only trading higher, but in the Ichimoku system, it would be trading above the cloud. So price would be above the cloud, the lagging span would be above the cloud, and on the 4-hour chart, that would be the signal that we need to take to take a long trade. And so there's two confirming pieces of analysis that show a high probability, and there are two unrelated pieces of analysis. Couple that in with the moon phase and all the financial astrology, there's all sorts of bullish conditions here. Now, let's take an inverse opinion. What if there is not a bullish move here? What if we just get is there a probability of selling pressure? Oh, hell yeah, there is. Because this could also just be a bear flag forming the right shoulder. This is a big bear move all the way from 24th of July on down. And actually we'd be forming like a bearish, it's a bear flag. This could just be a bear flag. And a breakdown of this bear flag would provide a huge thrust lower back down to those yearly lows at 5,700, and then that would bring us to completing a head and shoulders pattern with a break of that neckline below the $5,600 value area, and then we would just kind of zoom down there, not much farther, probably to that 5,400 or 5,000 value area. That's what we're looking at. But otherwise, you know, there is the case for the bearish momentum here. And if we don't get a lot of responsive buying any higher, that's exactly what's going to play out. It's just going to get weaker, and we won't see a drive higher. That could, and that is honestly right now, as I'm looking at this going into the Monday afternoon, that's kind of the feeling I'm getting. I'm not feeling a lot of or seeing a lot of strength in the bulls right now. This is actually looking pretty weak. And the where I'm going back into true USD is if we get a breakdown below this entire flag here. So I don't want it to cross below 6,600. Then I'm going to go back into true USD and wait for it to do something where, you know, I'll have a buy stop up here. Because more than likely, if we were to travel down lower, I'd have to wait to get back in again until we got lower. But yeah. Anyways, well, hour goes by fast. So put in some trade ideas that I'm looking at and watching to see those play out. I'm going to see this market play out. I mean, as we get further into the afternoon here, this is where Bitcoin likes to just kind of flush. So it's an area to be careful of and be aware of. But yeah, I'm looking at the alts here. They are catching a nice bid. Cardano's, you know, catching a nice drive here. So is XLM. In fact, the whole, I wonder if the altcoin market as a whole is actually, yeah, the whole altcoin market is doing pretty well right now. AUR is up 57%. It's crazy. All right. Anyways, yeah, hope you guys have a good rest of your trade week. Forex Lens customers, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 in the morning. The rest of you, I will see you. I hope to see you tomorrow again at 1 in the afternoon. Again, please like and subscribe. And this is going to be a paid service after the 31st, I believe. So, yeah, I hope you guys have found some value. Please ask questions. Enjoy the recordings. And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.